East with Journey to Programming. It's Saturday morning here out in the East Coast, actually. If I haven't told you before, I'm now living out in the Boston area. And I'll be out here for a little longer. I've been out here for almost a year, and I'm looking forward to doing some more work here or wherever it takes me, actually. But what I want to talk about today is I want to see what you guys are up to on a Saturday, right? So it's a Saturday. A lot of you guys are currently either developers or you're engineers or you're already in industry or doing some kind of job, but you're probably on Journey to Programming in hopes of either updating your skills, maybe gaining some new skills, or possibly to find a new job, right? So it's Saturday morning. What are you doing on Saturday morning to drive your mission forward and to get yourself a new job? What I like to do on the weekends is outside of playing and maybe going to the gym and then doing something outside of the norm, I try to do more work. But that usually involves me learning or programming or developing. And that's just what I do. It's kind of been my hobby for several years. It's what I enjoy kind of spending my extra time on. I try to always do my own work on the weekends and in the late evenings. I try to avoid doing client work, or if I'm currently employed, I try to avoid taking my normal full-time job out of the workspace. But I still continue to develop my skills on the weekends, as well as when I can, late in the evenings and nights on weekdays. So I want to see what you guys are up to. Are you spending that time working on your skills? Do you develop your ability to communicate at a technical, non-technical level? Do you develop your engineering skills and your ability to solve problems? If you're not spending that time and working on your skills when you're not at school or you're not at work or you're not with family, then when else are you going to do it? If you're currently looking for a new job and your skills are a little bit choppy or rough and you're wondering, man, how am I going to improve my skills? I have to go to, and maybe you're saying you have to go to a boot camp or you need to find some training, then I really do challenge you to take a step back and think about it. You have so much more free time available to you if you make it that way, so that you can go and do your own work on the side and teach yourself and really progress those skills. And that's the important trait of a great engineer or developer. I mean, you need to be able to teach yourself and prioritize your time so that you can improve those skills and grow as a professional, as an individual, to be quite honest. This really does segue into a post I put up just the other day, and it relates to it partially. It's about thinking about solving solutions at a high level, and it breaks down the idea of being an implementer and being somebody that could think about problems and come up with the infrastructure or the software architecture and the back-end architecture, and it differentiates those two and explains how important it is to be able to think at that high level, even though when you're really starting out, it's sometimes a little bit more of an implementer type focus. When you're starting out in industry, when you're maybe a few years in, or if you're just in a normal software engineering position, a lot of times you're not expected to think at a really high level. You're expected to create great solutions to complex problems. And you're expected to make simple solutions to complex problems because that's an important thing to do. But you're not always thought of as somebody who's going to be thinking about the cloud infrastructure that's required to drive a back end for a user-facing application. You're not asked, oh, okay, so maybe we need to throw up an AWS server and a few S3 buckets, put up a few headless CMSs in there so that can drive data into an application that people are going to be using daily, and we want to be able to change out the content regularly, and we want to be able to also account for analytics data, which we could store on AWS, on a Postgres database, or we could do it on another web server, maybe shared hosting, or we could put on a MySQL database. Those aren't questions that are usually asked when you're starting out, but you can develop the skills and start thinking that way as somebody who's just starting out, or as just a normal daily contributor or regular contributor to source code, you can start thinking at that high level. Start following and figuring out what those senior level developers are doing in their time, and think about how are they solving these problems. How do they decide that the applications that I'm working on will require a backend on AWS that needs a Postgres database to be created in between, and then needs a whole bunch of these scripts to be running in the background, which are going to act as a headless type CMS so that it can drive data only on demand rather than constantly running like a normal server would for example, a website like a WordPress database, which also has a CMS. So these are a lot of the types of things that you don't know how to answer when you're first starting out, even after several years. If you haven't done a lot of architecting of solutions and had to purchase and figure out infrastructure, then it's not something you would know right off the bat. So you have to develop those skills on your own, and the only way to do that is you either have to be trained on it, which doesn't really happen a lot in our industry, or you have to take the initiative and learn on your own. Think about it this way. If you want to develop your skills and become a senior or a lead in your current job or a future job, you need to be able to think at a high level. You need to be able to say, all right, I'm going to back off implementing solutions and writing source code immediately. And instead, I'm going to think about how are we going to solve these problems. I'm going to think about the fact that, okay, I'm developing a game or a Unity application for a broad range of users, but that's also going to have connected to it the ability to change out assets. I need my artists to be able to provide different assets for the seasons maybe. Or we want to be able to track the user analytics, right? We want to see, for example, I'm playing a competitive game. I want to know the stats that people are getting in that game. I want to be able to track that so that I can deliver some analytics online and I can create a competitive, sporty type game. And the only way to be able to do that is you have to do it early, and you have to be able to think about that. So your seniors, your leads, your system architects, those guys are all taking a step back from implementation so that you're not just receiving like specifications or requirements in the form of a doc, a spec doc, or a game design doc, and implementing it. Instead, they're taking a step back, and they're the ones making that doc really to the T and handing it off to the developers that are just implementing and writing source code in whatever language it is. If you're in games, a lot of times you're working in C++ or C#. You may be also interfacing with a bunch of different languages if you're doing Python, if you're using JavaScript for some back-end stuff, if you're using PHP for some server stuff. There's a whole bunch of different ways you could be working between multiple languages. But again, if you want to move into that high-level role and have that high-level responsibility and be part of the design and architecture process, then you're going to need to be able to think at that high level. The first step is take a step back and start thinking about not just the source code solutions or what you're going to write in code to make this work, but think about all the moving pieces. Think about how you could deliver the big picture idea with the technologies that you know. And then when you find lapses in your technology experience or knowledge, start learning, start researching, see what other people are using for solving these types of solutions. There's tons of resources online. Everybody loves Stack Overflow. That's a great resource. Just go and search for the problem you're looking at and maybe architecture as a extra kind of word on your search. You'll start finding things in Google. I mean, just take the time to do the research, buy a few design and architecture books, and practice. That's the number one thing. AWS gives you a whole bunch of free services if you're trying to learn it. And you can just go sign up on their website. Just go to AWS. And again, if you don't know what AWS is, Amazon Web Services, go on there and sign up for an account. You'll get a free basic one. And I think it gives you like 750 hours or something like that of the micro server tiers. And then go set up a server. Go set up some back-end services. Go set up a database. Or go do it on another platform, maybe Firebase, which is Google's web services. So you need to be able to learn this stuff. If you don't want to learn the back-end cloud stuff, you may still need to learn how do you design a schema so that from your game you can measure and you can deliver from your interactive or from Unity or from Unreal Engine some sort of HTTP call that will hit a cloud database and update your user stats into there, and think about the protocols that need to be designed for that. Do you want to transfer the entire user's username and their account information, or do you want to tokenize that? Do you want to make it a little bit more private? Do you want to deliver all of the characteristic data, or do you want to deliver just a sub-portion? Maybe you're calculating a power rating or a defense rating in your actual game logic, and you don't want to deliver every piece of characteristic data. You just want to deliver that ultimate calculation, and you just want to deliver a few stats, maybe how many enemies they've killed, etc. How long they've been playing. Maybe they want to know how many hours they've been playing. That's a common thing to know, especially on Steam. On Steam, you know everybody's time in games. So there's a whole bunch of different things that you should start thinking about if you want to move to a high-level role. And if you want to start solving problems and getting paid more, you tend to move into higher-paying positions when you can think about the big picture and grand scheme of software. Now, the article goes into a little bit more depth. I kind of went on a little tangent there, but the article goes in a little more depth into why developing solutions at a high level is, first of all, more important than just implementing right away and writing source code, and second, why you're usually more highly paid and respected in industry if you are a senior, a lead, an architect, or basically somebody that everyone looks up to in industry or at your job, and they look to you to be the decision maker, even though you're not necessarily the person implementing the entire solution set. Maybe you're only spending 30% of your day, 40% of your day actually writing code and making solutions, but the rest of your day you're engineering complex architectures, and you're coming up with unique solutions. You've basically become a complete R&D developer, and you're actually coming up with outside-of-the-box thinking type solutions, but they're all high-level thinking. And then you're working with a team of developers that are actually doing a lot of the grunt of the development. And that's not bad. It's just, that's how it ends up playing out if you're developing your skills at the high level, because you only have so much time of the day. You can't also implement everything if you're doing things at a high level. So you need to be able to think at a high level, do some implementation, have the understanding of how source code works. You probably were a developer before, so you should know that stuff. And then the most important thing between the two is you have to be able to communicate the requirements for the high-level development and the low-level development, and which would be the implementation. You have to be able to communicate the differences between that very clearly, so that what you're imagining as a big picture can be made into something. And those are skills that take time to develop. It's a Saturday. If you're not working on your skills on the weekends, in your free time, and you are at home complaining that you're not able to find a job, you're never evolving your position, and you're not learning enough, then I challenge you to take a little bit more time out of your weekends and your free time. Instead of playing games, instead of sitting at home and doing nothing, instead of always going out with your friends to drink and party, take some time to work on your skills. Go to a coffee shop, go to a library. Libraries still do exist, and they are open on Saturdays a lot of the time. They may be limited hours, but that's great. If you're already not spending that time, go work on those limited hours during the morning and early afternoon at the library, then go home and do whatever you normally do. Okay? I challenge you to do that. Again, this is Eastwood's Journey to Programming. Have a good one, you guys.